This hour is Brother Wayne Blake. He's spoken once already this week, but this is an additional lesson that he took on at the last minute because of the death of Brother Graham Moulton over in England. Brother Ken Chumley had to leave and head over there. And so I asked Brother Blake to take this lesson on Daniel, the 2nd chapter, and the 7th chapter, dealing with Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Not the easiest of lessons to develop and work up, but know that he's going to have a great lesson for us. He graduated from the Spring Bible Institute in 1998 and has... David was one of the instructors, and he says he kicked him out. So he has worked in Texas, Tennessee, Louisiana. He speaks on lectureship. He's spoken on our lectureship before, and also holds gospel meetings, directs Bible camps. We do appreciate him for the stand that he takes. Especially appreciate him taking this lesson on very short notice. And know that he's going to do a great job with this lesson on Nebuchadnezzar's dream. We do need to make sure.
I just knew that's why he stayed up here. I just knew that. And I took my little nameplate off because they started griping about that too. That's off to the side. So I just took that off, pitched that up here on the front. I didn't want to go through that part of it. I got the call Wednesday to deal with this text. And brethren, you can read the manuscript because I'm going to tell you there are some issues in this these two chapters, chapter 2 and chapter 7, that I didn't have time to prepare for and give due diligence to, because I believe if you're going to stand before a group of people, you need to have yourself prepared to do so. And I humbly bow out, but I will stick primarily with chapter 2, around verse 44 and verse 45. I was all the trip all the way up here, and even last night, and then this morning when I got up to study some more, I was trying to think of something witty to come out here, and because Brother Ken, he speaks with that accent, I couldn't come up with anything. I was trying to think, do I have a phrase I could use the Queen's English with? Well, the only Queen I know is my wife, and she speaks hillbilly. And I speak East Texas, so my daughter is in for a thrill when but just ask her to say Alabama. Oh, it just melts me. She is going to be a Texacoasian. That's the language she's going to speak. I've said many times to people in the past that I'm not from Texas anymore. I'm from Texaco. And if you know anything about border states, you'll understand that. In Daniel 2, we read about Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's interpretation. Now, the interesting thing about this dream is that he had the dream and yet he forgot it. And I find that very interesting, and yet, through the providence of God, allowed Daniel to show forth even more the greatness of God. He's like my daughter when she wakes up and forgets a dream and she says, "It fell out of my brain." Well, that's kind of what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He woke up and he knew that he had dreamed something that was just terrible, to the point where he had to have an interpretation. So he called all his mystics and wise men together. And they come together and they said, "Okay, what's the dream?" He says, "No, you tell me the dream and then you interpret it." And the point was, well, how do you expect us to do that? He challenges them And then God reveals the secret of the dream to Daniel. And in the night vision in Daniel chapter 2, verse 14 through verse 23. And Daniel approaches the king and explains that God has made known to him both the dream and the interpretation. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 24 through 30. And Daniel then tells the dream and gives the interpretation of it, to the amazement of Nebuchadnezzar. If you would, turn over to Daniel chapter 2. Begins verse 31. Thou, O king, servant and great, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, and his belly and his thighs of brass, and his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. And then he continues on down through verse 49, dealing with this. And so what he tells the king is that he's seen this great image. The head is of gold, the chest and the arms are of silver, the belly and the thighs are of bronze, and with legs of iron, the feet mixed with iron and clay. And the great image was then destroyed by a great stone made without hands. The image representing the rise and the fall of the four empires, and the stone representing the kingdom that God would set up. The king praises God and exalts Daniel along with his three friends. And then there are certainly two key thoughts expressed in this chapter, particularly. God is first of all the creator of secrets, and that God can make known the future and bring it to pass. But of particular interest is what we read about beginning in verse 44. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Forasmuch as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron and the brass and the clay, the silver and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. This kingdom, one that God himself, the God of heaven himself, would set up. And that it would never be destroyed, but then it would consume other kingdoms as well. And so this morning, what we're going to strive to do is break this up basically into three points that I'm going to try to make if time allows. First of all, when would God set this kingdom up? Secondly, had it been set up as God foretold? And then thirdly, if it has, and if it shall never be destroyed, where is it now? What is the future of this kingdom? And then, can we be a part of this kingdom today? So in this first, as we look at this, we will strive to look at these 3 points. But first of all, we look at the preparation. The preparation for the kingdom. He says in verse 44, in the days of these kings. And Daniel describes the image as depicting 4 kingdoms which shall rise and fall. The first one is definitely Babylon. Verse 37 and 38. And with Babylon as the starting point, then we are represented then with the Medo-Persians, and as secular history as well as the Bible itself teaches, the Grecians and then the Romans. These 4 great empires. And there they would look at the establishment after the fact of the indestructible kingdom. in the days of the Roman Empire, when the time in fulfillment had come. Notice that John the Baptizer, even himself, began preaching during the days of the Roman Empire, and his message was, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He was speaking about what Daniel had already prophesied. The kingdom is at hand. Jesus himself proclaimed this, saying that the time is fulfilled in Mark chapter 1, verse 14 and 15. What time had been fulfilled? The time that had been described by Daniel. So secondly, the preparation. Secondly, the establishment. During Jesus' earthly ministry, it was at hand. This is what both John and Jesus himself talked about in Matthew 3, verse 1 and 2, and Mark 1, verse 14 and 15. And yet after Jesus' death, there were those that still were waiting on the kingdom. Joseph of Arimathea is a good example. In Luke chapter 23, verse 30, 50 and 51. But following the ascension of Jesus, he then was far above all principality and power, might and dominion. Ephesians 1, verse 20 and 21. And all things were subject to him. Sounds to me like a kingdom, does it not? That's exactly what he established. He was the king of the kingdom that Daniel prophesied about. He is the ruler of all the kings of the earth. Revelation 1 and verse 5. He rules the nations with a rod of iron. Revelation 2 verse 26 and 27. He truly has all authority in heaven and on earth. Matthew chapter 28 and verse 18. And therefore this supports what is revealed later in Daniel. If you would, turn over to Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. He says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of God came in the clouds with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. Jesus, the King, the ruler, has all authority in heaven and in earth. And therefore, understanding this, then we need to understand that where one like the Son of Man approaches the Ancient of Days, the Son of Man being Jesus, the Ancient of Days being God. And it is given dominion. Jesus was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom which shall not be destroyed. And therefore it's clear that the King, Jesus, has received the kingdom, and that indestructible kingdom was then set up, and he returned to heaven. But one might naturally say, well, where is it? Where is this kingdom? Well, let's look at that. Let's look at the nature of this indestructible kingdom. First of all, we need to remember about this kingdom. It was described by Daniel as a stone cut without hands, which became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. That makes it, does it not, a different kind of kingdom. Because what is generally, during the times of Daniel and other kings, what were the kingdoms made of? Stone, gold, brass, silver, all the things that the earth had to offer. But this kingdom doesn't have those things. Well then, where did it come from? Where is it? Well, the Bible is very clear. Without hand suggests the idea that it is not your ordinary kingdom. And also that it would begin to start small and then grow larger. Compare this with what Jesus taught about the nature of his kingdom. He said in John chapter 18 and verse 36 that his kingdom is not of this world. But wait, Jesus, you're going to establish a kingdom. Where is this kingdom? It's not of this world. You know, we talk about this all the time, but that's where the Jew got off track. Even his own apostles, his disciples, got off track. Because they kept asking, Jesus, when are you going to establish your kingdom? Where's your kingdom? And Jesus kept having to remind them, my kingdom is not of this world. It's not going to be a physical place like Jerusalem, the temple. That's not the kingdom that he came to establish. It will start small and grow to encompass the whole world. Matthew chapter 13, verse 30 through 33. Thus, this indestructible kingdom would start small and spiritually would grow and grow and grow. But to be a part of this kingdom didn't mean you were born a Jew or a Roman. No, there were other entrance requirements. Other things you must do to be a part of that kingdom. And therefore this kingdom involves those in the church. The Christians at Colossae were said to be in the kingdom. Colossians chapter 1 verse 12 and 13. Those at Thessalonica likewise were spoken about those who were a part of the kingdom. 1 Thessalonians 2 and verse 12. And along with the 7 churches of Asia, Revelation 1 verse 6 and verse 9. Indeed, all Christians who do their part and receive Jesus Christ and all that means are a part of this indestructible kingdom. Revelation 12, verse 28. Including every one of us here today. We have a part. We are able to be a part of this kingdom. And therefore it fulfills the statement that this kingdom would fill the whole earth. Because you think about it. If you were to think about it like this, we're on this side of the globe, and where's Jerusalem? This side. And yet I can be a part of God's kingdom here, as well as in Jerusalem, or anywhere else in the world. That's what the kingdom will do. This kingdom that's indestructible. So, whoever is willing to repent and believe in the gospel, Mark 1 and verse 15, can be a part of this kingdom that Jesus established when he sat down at the right hand of God, following his ascension to heaven. And therefore that leads us to another question. What is the future of this kingdom? Where is it going? What is the future of this kingdom? Well, the future, first of all, is that it will last forever. As Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2 and verse 44, which shall never be destroyed. It shall stand forever. And as the writer in Hebrews stated, a kingdom which cannot be shaken. Hebrews 12 verse 28. And as the angel Gabriel said to Mary, talking about Jesus, of his kingdom, there will be no end. Here's the kingdom. It's here. And at Christ's coming, it then will be delivered back to the Father. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 23 through 26, as taught by Paul. It says, when Jesus comes, he will deliver the kingdom to God the Father, having put an end to all rule, authority, and power. And until then, Christ then will reign. And he will have all his enemies placed, until all his enemies are placed under his feet. And that last enemy, Paul says, is death. And as Jesus taught in the parable of the tares, in Matthew chapter 13, verse 40 and 43, at the end of the age, his angels will gather out of the kingdom, those that offend and those that practice lawlessness. And then the righteous, those who are citizens of the kingdom, will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. And so this kingdom, foretold by Daniel, proclaimed by John the Baptist and Jesus himself, was begun in the days of the Roman captivity, Roman Empire, with Christ as its king and his disciples as the citizens of the kingdom. It is an indestructible kingdom because it will continue on, ever growing. You know, there's something to be said for that, because we need to be reminded that the kingdom potentially has the ability, as long as the gospel is here, and people have the ability to read it, the kingdom will continue on long after we're gone. I don't know about you, I plan on staying around another 30, 40 years for my daughter. And I hope that she too will be able to see all the great and many things through her life that the kingdom has to offer. But there's great promise and understanding that the kingdom cannot be destroyed. But what about the last question that I brought up? Can I be a part of this indestructible kingdom? You know, because we read about it in Daniel, we read about Jesus and about John the Baptizer and the things that they said. Well, some may want to know, well, what do I do? Can I be a part of this kingdom? Yes, you can. You see, Jesus and his apostles told us how to do that. And that, to me, is the sad and yet silly mindset of so many people in this world today, who want to come up and say, well, no, Jesus really didn't establish his kingdom. Or they'll say, well, you know, he established this church for now because, you know, he didn't have enough power to stop people from putting to death. He died at the time God never expected. And on they may go. We must first of all be born again of the Spirit and of water. John chapter 3 and verse 5. And the allusion there to the idea of baptism, commanded of all who want to be a part of the kingdom indestructible. But there are some today in the kingdom who may one day be cast out. And that's the whole point that Jesus got at when he's talking about the tares. You know, there are a lot of people today, we see them in congregations. Not so much as the congregation gets smaller, because we're running them off. And I mean running them off not because we're looking for it, but the idea is that the more truth is preached and taught, people will either accept it or they'll move on. And so in the smaller congregations we basically have 100% attendance, 100% participation, 100%, because we're down so small numbers. But universally, there are those that all their life they sat in a pew. They went through the motions. They did all the right things. They came forward one night or one day, one morning, whatever, and they were baptized. And they, somewhat of a semblance, kind of served. They would do this and do that. But their heart wasn't in it. Well, Jesus said, that's okay. You may have been in my kingdom, but you weren't a part of my kingdom. And therefore, you're going to be expelled. And that day's coming. It may not come in your lifetime, but when Jesus comes again, the Bible is very clear. The angels will put them out. I want to talk to you about something that is bothering me. Brother Tim talked about it, but I want to talk about a specific group of people that are in the church. At one time, some of these, we might have considered them faithful. But right now, there's a movement that's going on. It's trying to bring us back to our roots. Disciples of Christ. They're our brethren. We need to get back with them. The Christian church. We need to get back with them. My understanding of the Scriptures is that unless they're about 115 to 20 years old, they can't repent of what they were never a part of to begin with. And so every generation from around basically 1906 and every generation from their own, they're members of the denomination. They're not members of the kingdom. And there are certain blessings that come to those who are part of the kingdom. And one of those blessings is we have what we call the second law of pardon. And that whenever I do sin, I have the ability to petition God, either publicly or privately, depending upon the sin. And God will forgive me of that sin if I'll repent. But God can't forgive people who are in their sins and have never had them washed away through baptism. Oh, I know, they'll say, well, they were baptized. The only things that we're off on, might be the instrument or maybe the organization or, you just start listing. Well, let me tell you something. They're not the New Testament church. And you can be off on anything you want to, but you measure up no differently than the Baptist or the Catholics or anybody else. You're not a part of the kingdom. You never were a part of the kingdom. Daniel never talked about you in Daniel 2. Paul and others talked about them. When he talked about those who would depart from the faith, heed the seducing spirits. And the admonition to all of us, like 1 John 4 and verse 1 and others, that we are to try the spirits. And yet we have those who are trying, sadly, who, if they did know at one time, they obviously have left the faith in their last few years. And now they're trying to get a group of people through the back door, through the side door, through a window, or anything else to try to get them into the kingdom. Brethren, there's only one door, and that's Jesus Christ. And if we won't submit to Jesus and enter the kingdom the way He commands it to be done, we're not a part of the kingdom. Well, I'm going to give y'all some time back. That's the first time I've ever done that. But I do want to tell you that I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on this. I know that this subject, you could do a lectureship just on the kingdom. But I want to touch on this because it's important to me that we get this nailed down, folks. people in denominations, there are no faithful Christians in denominations. They're not a part of the kingdom. And until they enter the kingdom through Jesus Christ, they're lost. And no amount of coaxing, no amount of turning my back to them, no amount of hoodwinking or whatever else you want to call it is going to get them in the Lord's kingdom. Because if we put them, quote, in the kingdom, we cease to be the kingdom. Because now we're in open fellowship with those that are not in fellowship with God. It goes back to authority. We've got to have authority for the things we do. Thank you for your attention.